or what we call first base, second base, right? Third base.
It says, my husband has had multiple affairs.
We would have to figure out what's going on that it's preventing you to have that connection with your partner.
We've tried counseling and several attempts on our own.
Realize that the purpose of connection is to have fun, right? And so it depends on, what type of connection do you have with your wife. Welcome to Session and Secrets. Today is a little different. I received a ton of emails and I decided to do a video to share some of your stories and some of the stories that I found interesting. And what do we have, Myra?
Yes, so first story, let's call him Armando, reads, my name is Armando and I believe I have a sex addiction. It has and continues to affect my relationship with my wife. I have not been physically unfaithful to my wife, but I continue to do things that harm her emotionally. For example, I created an Instagram account where I followed Instagram pages of women who are showing off their bodies, and then I would send them direct messages trying to flirt with them. I knew they would never respond, but it was some sort of thrill, sexual gratification for me. But I also knew the pain that I would cause my wife if she found out what I was doing. And she has. She has caught me multiple times doing these things. Every time I promise her I will stop, I do for prolonged periods, but then I revert back to it. I want to stop. I believe I have an addiction and need help.
Well, I'm glad you're reaching out, Armando, because based on your behaviors, it doesn't sound right like you want to be in a committed relationship, especially if you know that it's hurting your wife. And so you have great awareness of what's going on. What would be important is that you figure out how long has that been going on. I would ask you, when did you start doing this? At what age? Is this your first long-term relationship, the relationship that you have with your wife? And so I would like you to ask, what are the behaviors or what are the emotions that are driving this behavior? Because behaviors are based on emotions. And so you would have to ask yourself, am I seeking validation? Am I seeking external validation? So that would mean maybe there's a void or there's issues with self-worth. And then you're seeking these relationships to strengthen your self-worth and to tell yourself that you're valued or that you're loved or that you have some type of worth. So it would be really important that you pause and you seek professional help to really get into the root of these behaviors that are going to destroy your relationship with your wife. And if you have children, that it's also going to have an impact on your children. So be kind and loving to yourself and seek help, seek professional help, and continue seeking healing and having a healthy relationship with your sex life. What's our next email?
Yeah, so our next email is a little general. It says, I'm dealing with what I think is sex addiction. Not too sure about how to start.
So in this case, I would ask you, assuming that you're a male or a female, the same questions. How long has that been going on? What are the problematic behaviors? Are you seeking? Are we talking about porn addiction? Are we talking about multiple sexual encounters and sexual relationships, or are you in a committed relationship? So whatever the case is, it would be what is addressing the problematic behavior or the behaviors that are out of your control. And so I would have to ask, how were you introduced to sexuality, and how long has this been going on, and how it's impacting your life, maybe your relationships, maybe your relationship with yourself, or your relationships with others. What's the next?
Okay, yeah. So moving on, this person says they're looking for assistance for marriage. It says, my husband has had multiple affairs, sought out escort services while on business trips, communicates with ex-girlfriend of 5 years, and so on. He thinks he has a sex addiction. It is destroying our marriage, and I don't know how much more I can take.
Well, you don't have to take anything you don't want to take to start with, okay? But so what's important is, first, if he's having the issue, I think I would ask you, why are you seeking the help? Right? If he's the one struggling with all these things, it would be important that he recognizes that and that he seeks the help that he needs or the guidance. And so sometimes we want to help others a lot and we want to heal them and we want to be there for them. But in all of that, we're not helping them, right? We cannot force anyone towards a healing journey. And so it would be important that you work on yourself and your boundaries and how, what are you willing to do and have an honest conversation, or what are you willing to take, right? And have an honest conversation of what you are willing to take and set that boundary and respect it for yourself, which means whatever you need, I need you to seek group therapy, individual therapy. I need you to go to classes, whatever it is. You have to commit to yourself that if he doesn't do that, then what are you going to do? What are you going to do about that? Are you going to end the relationship, or are you going to continue giving passes, right? That will be up to you.
That's true. I agree too. Are you ready for the next one?
Yes.
It might shock you, it might not. This person says, I've been married for 5 years, never had sex. We've tried counseling and several attempts on our own. It's always awkward and results in more discontent than anything else. I'd love for you to help me figure out what I can do to make things work with my husband.
Okay, so it could be several reasons. This person is using the word discontent, which would mean uncomfortable. She didn't say it's painful. So it will depend, right? Sometimes couples don't get a chance to develop that sexual intimacy, or what we call first base, second base, right, third base. And so sometimes, if like in an arranged marriage, if they just meet the day of the marriage, or they don't get a chance to have much interaction, then they don't get a chance to develop that type of play, right? And so it would be important to figure out if that's what's going on. If it's an issue of pain and her inability to have sex, or his inability to have sex because of erectile dysfunction, then we would have to talk and figure out what's going on with him. And so figure out first, have you ever been able to have sex? If you have not been able to have sex in any other relationships, then what's going on? Maybe are you able to have sex with yourself? If you're able to have sex with yourself, then maybe there's some performance anxiety that the dynamic changes when there's someone else in the room, right? And so if it's related to maybe a woman having pain and not being able to have regular intercourse, then we would have to look at something that might be vaginismus if it's not a physiological reaction, right? Something not medical. So then if that's not it, then it's because the nerves or the muscles around the vagina spasm or tense up, and so they block any type of penetration. So if you have never been able to have sex, then it would be primary vaginismus, because you have never been able to have any type of intercourse, or physical exams, or insert like tampons. So that would be primary. Secondary vaginismus would mean that you were able to have sex in the past and something happened. Maybe you had a child. Maybe the relationship is not where it's supposed to be. You're not happy in the relationship, or a traumatic event, and now you're not able to have sex. So it could be. I would need more details.
Okay, let's see. With moving on with the next one reads, I've been having erectile dysfunction lately with my girlfriend. This is a new thing, as we've always in the past had a great sex life. I believe it may have something to do with performance anxiety, and would love to learn more about treatment.
Yeah, so for this email, I think I would ask first how old this guy is, right? So if it's a young person, 20s, 30s, and his health is okay, then I always suggest check your testosterone levels, that can affect your erectile dysfunction. So if it's low testosterone and you're tired, then that can impact your performance. And so if testosterone levels are fine, and then I would ask, how's the relationship? If you feel happy in the relationship, then we would go into what's going on in your personal life. How's your work-life balance? Are you having any other stressors? Because sometimes something happens and maybe you're too tired and you decided to have sex because you didn't want to say no, or you push yourself to have sex, and maybe your body is just too tired and you were not able to perform, and then maybe that creates a small trauma because you were not, the guy's not able to keep the erection. And so then now the next time it comes, now they're worried, they're concerned, they're anxious, and then it becomes like a vicious cycle, right? Because then they already start something that is supposed to be fun with worry and with anxiousness. And guess what? It's like self-sabotage. It happens again, right? And so then this cycle just gets reassured. This negative cycle gets reassured. So we just have to figure out, like, when did it start happening, right? So has it happened before in the past in other relationships? Is it just this relationship? And then what's going on? Just address all parts of you.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's interesting. Okay, so moving on. I even want to know the answer to this. Let's see. I have been married for almost 9 years, and then sex in my marriage has considerably decreased. We are both young and very happy in every other aspect in our lives, but this one. I would like some help with intimacy and advice as to how to rekindle my marriage sexually.
Yeah, this can be very common. Sometimes couples get into a routine. Even sometimes people think that the couples that don't have sex is because they don't like each other, and that's not always true. That can be the case, but that's not always true. Sometimes couples really like each other. The thing is, like, sometimes they do lose. They become like sisters, like siblings, right? Too friendly, or they lose their filters. They get a little too comfortable, and so with each other. And so what would be important is to just go back to the beginning of what helped them have that play, maybe that erotic play, that play that became a little more intimate. And so it would be just rebuilding that, right? Or maybe sometimes it's too much closeness. Sometimes some people need a more separation to feel desired, and some people need more closeness to feel desired, right? So sometimes it's just having a balance. So if you're spending all day, all night together and always with each other, then maybe do the opposite. Create some separation. Get a hobby that is away from your partner. And so obviously whatever's going on is not working out, right? And so we have to create something that creates a different dynamic.
Okay, next question has to do with our young audience. Says, I am a young 19-year-old sex addict and I'm seeking major help. I'm hoping you can aid me in my journey for a healthy sexual manner of living.
Yes, and this story I find interesting because sometimes parents just don't think that their child is looking at something related to corn. And so what would be important is to understand most of these addictions or most children are exposed to corn around the ages of 9 and 12. And so if you think about maybe my generation, we had still pictures, right? Or magazines. But now it's live and it's action and it's like real time, right? And so sometimes, the brain of the child is not ready for this. And so this becomes the introduction to sexuality, because if no one talks about sex at home or gives sex education, then that's their education, right? That's their introduction. That's what they think it is.
Do you think the social media and technology now just makes it 10 times?
Yes, it's a door to the world, right? And so it would be important to understand that sex addiction tends to start at a very early age, and someone at 19, great for you to have that understanding and to want to change that and have a healthier relationship with your sexuality.
Okay, let's see. One of the other emails that we got says, my husband and I have been together 17 years and have a truly loving and supportive marriage. Neither of us is having an affair and we don't have children, but we've lapsed into a sexless marriage most of the last decade after having a very happy sex life in the beginning.
Okay. Is that the end?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So, similar to the other email, couples tend to lose or tend to get into routine. Routine gets in the way. Sometimes the schedules, right? Sometimes couples are like passing ships. And so often I ask couples their schedule. When do you get together? When do you meet each other, right? And so opposites are always not helpful. So some couples are together all the time, that affects their intimacy. Some couples hardly see each other, right? Maybe one works night and then the other one works mornings. And so they have a really short period of time to make a connection. And we would have to identify what got in the way of them losing their intimacy. Sometimes it's something external, like someone's mother passed away and they had something terrible happen to them in their family, and so they started losing that connection. But what would be important is to figure out what would spark that, what would get the ball rolling, whether it's more closeness or whether it's more separation, and figure out what sparks your desire, because sometimes the desire, bodies change, people change, and so what's important is to identify now what would work, right? What worked in the past to keep that flame going, and what could spark that again.
Okay, so this next question is a marriage question again. Those are very popular. So it says, seeking help with intimate issues in my marriage of 10 years with my wife and my low sex drive. Having trouble wanting to have sex with her and feel like I'm developing an addiction to corn. And that would be it.
Okay. So this person has been married for
It says 10 years with my wife, and he has a low sex drive.
Okay. Well, then in that case, I don't think you have a low sex drive, because you are having sex just with yourself. We would have to figure out what's going on that it's preventing you to have that connection with your partner, right? If you're watching porn and masturbating, that means you have a sex drive. It stops with you. And sometimes that could be because it's easier, right? And sometimes sex can become goal-driven, and people focus on certain things that need to happen. And what would be important is to realize that the purpose of connection is to have fun, right? And so it depends on, what type of connection do you have with your wife. Sometimes people have resentments or shut down because there's something going on outside of sex and intimacy, and issues. Emotional relationship issues start trickling down to intimacy and to sex. So we would have to figure out, is it something within the relationship, or is it something that within you, right? Is there something going on in your life that maybe you're sad, maybe you are stressed out, and maybe reaching out to your wife or seeking your wife seems overwhelming for some reason. And so we would have to figure out, like, what are your emotions and what's driving you to just keep that to yourself.
Okay, so this next, this one is a story. So it's pretty long, but I will take my time and read it to you. It says, hi, I'm 40 and my wife is 35. We went all of 2024 without having sex, and we're trying to get our sex life to the place we want it to be. We're still very much in love. There has been no infidelity on my part or hers, but due to the past traumas and sexual abuse, she's in therapy for this. in her life, medications have affected her sex drive in the past, and I didn't want to push things with her, so I just took care of myself. Her medications also caused her to gain weight, so that affected her confidence, but not my attraction to her. I have had some issues with ED in the past, which I have prescription for when I need it, but starting last June, I started weight loss medications, and that has greatly affected my ability to get hard and stay hard without the medication. The mind and soul are more than willing, but the blood flow just won't cooperate. Another hiccup if she doesn't have any sort of imagination. What I mean by this is she doesn't think about sex unless it's in a book she's reading or it's brought up to her. She doesn't dream or fantasize about it. She doesn't crave it. If I initiate, she's willing to, but if not, she says no and goes about her day. She doesn't get that build-up need or desire. While me, on the other hand, have to go and deal with all those feelings and desires, and it's torture. I know I've talked a lot about her, but I have my issues as well. Because of the above, I masturbate at least once a day, and I've more than likely developed a grip because it's so hard for me to finish during intercourse. I have a hard time opening up to her with what I want sexually because she doesn't have the confidence in herself to do what I like to have done. It's nothing super kinky or anything taboo. She just lacks the confidence to even attempt it. So that's the basics of what's going on with us.
A lot going on. And so first we're dealing with sexual trauma, right? Her sexual trauma. And so she's addressing that. And when you're introduced to sexuality in a way that you're not supposed to, or it's out of your control, then the body keeps that memory. And if you come from a maybe conservative family where sex was not talked about, then there's no chance to correct that. And so it's good that she's in therapy. And of course, it would be good to have some type of communication because maybe the conversations, usually when couples talk about these things, it becomes a negative experience, right? They're fighting about this. One is crying or the other one's yelling. And so instead of creating something that is supposed to be positive and free and playful, then we start adding more stressors so then sex intimacy becomes heavier. So what would be important is that you address this and you seek professional help because we're dealing with sexual trauma, and also realizing what does she want to do about this, right? Is it something that she wants to work on? Is she going to make this a priority in your relationship? Because just like in the other email where we want people to do, be, and live in a certain way, we can't force people. And so what's important is also to see if you have the same goals. Like your concern is your concern her concern? And if it's not, then we need to have that conversation of why this matters and have this conversation in a way that is going to create connection and not add more stress to something that is supposed to be fun and playful. And in regards, he also talked about weight loss medication, right?
Yes.
So yes, in some people, weight loss medication affects their erectile dysfunction. So you have one benefit, but then it affects another part, right? So you have to decide, you consult with your doctor. And same with steroids, same thing. It affects men.
So moving on, it says, hello, I struggle from sex addiction and need help how to control my urge. So give us some tips.
Some tips? It's just really easy. 1, 2, 3. So I think that's when people seek tips, they usually want a quick answer, right? And what it's important with sex addiction is first identify your routine, right? People usually have a routine. They get home and they do it. Or they go, before you go to sleep, you do it, right? So first start developing a different routine, do something else. However you're accessing this, then make sure it's away. That way you're more thoughtful about it, right? So if you do it in the bathroom, Don't take your device in the bathroom. Keep it somewhere where you don't see it, and also make sure that you figure out what is this feeling, right? Any addiction is feeling something, and you would have to pause and think, what is this what is this feeling? And sometimes I call, corn addiction, or it's like the silent addiction, because it's really intimate. People don't know. If you see a drunk person, they're drunk. If you see them that they're high, you can see that they're high, and you can really see the effects. But this is something that really is very intimate, and people tend to struggle on their own with it and not really talk about it. So it's great that you opened up and you talked about it, and that you want to get help.
Okay, so one of the other emails that you received says, my fiance and I are having intimacy problems. My fiance has experienced sexual trauma, which has caused her to be uncomfortable with sex and with herself.
Yeah, and that's very common. Like I said before, if you've experienced sexual trauma, you may have also developed issues with self-worth, right? And also loving your body. And so if you don't love your body, then you're going to find it difficult for someone else to love it. In this case, and I would highly recommend seeking professional help to address it, for the person that experiences sexual trauma, to address it and really get to the root of how the sexual trauma is impacting you. Sometimes when people go to therapy and seek therapy for sexual trauma, they address all other types of how they're impacting their lives, right? Like maybe their relationships, maybe they're scared at night, maybe they are nervous, or maybe they're having panic attacks. But most of the time they don't really address how it is impacting their sex life directly. So it would be important that you talk to a professional that is trained in sex therapy. And well, thank you very much, Myra. Thank you for reading those emails.
Anytime. Thank you for giving us such good insight.
And thank you all for watching, and hope to get more stories and more emails.